Why America Can't Stop Cyber Attacks. U.S. to give ransomware hacks priority similar to terrorist attacks. Hackers took control of the USA's gasoline by hacking the Colonial Pipeline. Then they went on to attack the meat supply. Looks like no meat for you guys. Hello everyone, welcome to Cybercrime Time. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss an update about the latest cybercrime news and trends. Let's move on. The cyber attacks were labeled as an organized crime. Of course it was organized. First they take away the gas and then the meat. USA has been subjected to a series of ransomware attacks. There aren't any signs of these attacks slowing anytime soon. Cybercrime has been under the light since 2013, but it wasn't something of supreme significance or impact that it could take down a pipeline. But it did happen.
The Kremlin is denying it has plans to conduct cyber attacks against
the silent ones are indeed the deadliest. Experts state that a ransomware case is similar to that of a hostage victim situation. Imagine that the United States is hit by a cyber attack that takes down much of the US financial infrastructure for several days. Internet sites of major banks are malfunctioning, ATMs aren't working, banks' internal accounting systems are going haywire, millions of people are affected. Oh my God! The first question that policymakers might debate is whether such an attack deserves a military response. But several problems immediately arise. First, would the US government, and specifically the National Security Agency, know for certain who had conducted the attack? It's relatively easy to assess the damage done by an attack on America's infrastructure, but less easy to assess the intent of that attack. Without being able to attribute the attack, or if there were some uncertainty about who was responsible, it would be very hard to strike back. Unlike conventional attacks, cyber attacks can be difficult to attribute with precision to specific actors. In the event of a major cyber attack, pressure to respond would be immediate and probably intense. But if a country strikes back and the forensics are erroneous, then the retaliation will have unnecessarily and inadvertently started a war. Russia's alleged meddling in the 2016 US presidential elections underscores the severity and immense reach of cyber attacks, like no other in history. To influence the election's outcome, authorities said these agents hacked into the computer networks of the Democratic Party to get information and strategically released it on the internet. In the private sector, companies have to step up their game against cyber attacks that are becoming all too common. This incident has brought the issue of cyber war again to the top of the news, but the possibilities it raises are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the role of cyber operations in modern warfare. The incident really does call for a war. Most, although not all analysts, agree that cyber will be a key domain in the conflicts of the future. Exactly how cyber will impact these future conflicts, however, is hard to say with any certainty. Cyber weapons are not like missiles or tanks because their initial impact is in the information domain. Their effects are much harder to judge. Russia is at the top of the list of sophisticated cyber adversaries faced by the US, a group that also includes Iran, China, and North Korea. Russia has made information conflict a critical and central pillar of its national security strategy. Cyber is a means for carrying out their geopolitical strategy. There is every reason for Russia to interfere in the 2018 and 2020 elections as well, with even more fervor and more effort. Even in cases where an attack is linked to one specific country, say Russia, it could be hard to know for sure whether it was directed by the Russian government. This is because governments like the Russian government appear to rely heavily on third parties to develop their cyber weapons and conduct their attacks. This offers them many benefits, deniability being one of them, but it also offers them less control over what their cyber warriors actually do, creating a so-called principal agent problem. In other words, an attack that originates from within the Russian cyber world might be the work of the Kremlin, or it might not. This further complicates the choice of response. Sometimes the culprit will be clear, of course, but in these cases, the question is how specifically to respond. So, it's impossible to state the real culprit? Some advisors might push for a cyber counterattack that inflicts equal damage on the guilty party, but this isn't always possible. If the perpetrator is a party like North Korea, then there's no equivalent financial system to target. But should the United States instead use conventional military weapons, like a cruise missile, perhaps on Pyongyang's cyber training facilities? A strike like that would clearly risk serious escalation of the conflict. It might be seen as disproportionate if the U.S. financial system had recovered in the interim, with relatively minimal real damage. Imagine, however, that the attack is against the U.S. power grid or oil and gas infrastructure. This kind of attack could easily have military consequences if it were extensive. The U.S. military has backup power generation capability, as well as stocks of fuel reserves. But those stores are not infinite. If such an attack on U.S. infrastructure has military consequences, the case for cyber retaliation, or even a Tomahawk cruise missile strike, starts to look a lot stronger. Even if the U.S. power grid were seriously affected by a cyber attack, however, and the United States knew with a high degree of confidence who the guilty party was, there would be reasons for caution, especially if the attack was an isolated incident and there were no other signs of aggression or malign intent. What even is the solution for this? This is because cyber attacks can have unanticipated consequences. With any military strike, collateral damage is always possible. But with most conventional attacks, methods of assessing and avoiding collateral damage are well developed and based on well-established physics principles and observational experience. But cyber weapons don't operate like missiles or tanks. They attack the underlying network or computer systems. The possibility of unexpected effects in the cyber world is much greater. For example, a cyber attack on an electrical grid might be intended to knock out the lights in a specific location, but end up affecting a whole region's energy supply. The world saw this potential with the Stuxnet worm, apparently intended for a very specific isolated network, an Iranian control system. The worm was discovered precisely because it spread beyond its intended target into other related networked systems. Stuxnet did not attack other control systems, but only because the designers programmed in a self-destruct date. If the designers had been less cautious, its effects would have been much more widespread. Therefore, before targeting a cruise missile at that hypothetical cyber hub in Pyongyang, the US president would want to have at least some knowledge of both the intentions of the attacker and the consequences, including secondary effects of the response. Otherwise, the United States might be starting a war by accident. But a desperate foreign leader might miscalculate that he can get away with a surreptitious attack on U.S. infrastructure for exactly these reasons. And that, in and of itself, is cause for concern. Yes, you gotta be wiser than that. This is why context will make a big difference. It's relatively easy to assess the damage done by an attack on America's infrastructure, but less easy to assess the intent of that attack. If the U.S. power grid is seriously disrupted by a cyber attack during an ongoing war with a known aggressor, it will be much easier to strike back with kinetic, i.e. physical force, or with cyber weapons, simply because it will be easy to assume the attack was intentional. Alternatively, a fearful foreign leader might lash out at the United States if she or he fears the United States is on the verge of conducting a devastating cyber attack. The hostility might come in the form of a massive preemptive cyber attack, a conventional attack, or in the extreme, even a nuclear salvo. Since the ability to mount cyber attacks depends on keeping targeted vulnerabilities secret, both sides may fear that their adversaries possess capabilities that have far-reaching destructive potential, even when they don't. This fear, in turn, could increase the tendency toward preemptive action, and hence escalation. Cyber adds new and significant uncertainty to warfare, making it difficult both to deter and respond. It'll take time and a great deal more research and analysis before the problem is fully understood. It does add new meaning to warfare, but let's not lose hope. Against that backdrop, fighting cyber threats has never been more important. It's the greatest terror on the economy, bar none. But policymakers' response to it has been moving at a snail's pace, according to high-ranking cybersecurity and risk management experts who spoke at a panel discussion on cyber risks at the Penn Wharton Budget Model's first Spring Policy Forum, which was held last month in Washington. Experts called for greater awareness of cyber threats at all levels, an inclusive approach to protect all parties affected, and steps to harden our defenses to make the cost too high for the payoff to carry out these cyber attacks. Meanwhile, lawmakers are taking cybersecurity more seriously than ever before. The number of hearings on cyber-related issues has risen from 1 month to 6 or 7 a week. Almost every authorizing and appropriating committee now wants to find a way to engage in cyber. really understanding and making sure that we are engaging with a nuanced view of what those lanes are to ensure that the legislation that comes out is smarter. Comment on what you think might be more effective in fighting against cybercrime. Stay tuned for more. It's a wrap for today. See you soon.